Do you want me to record audio from my side, like the the audio locally or anything, or are you just pulling
No,
the?
I'm just going to use the Zoom if that's
Yeah,
okay with you. It
sure.
records both separately and it's come out like pretty good. I haven't
Yeah,
complained.
I've so and you've actually got the video on Spotify, which is I've only seen with Joe Rogan. So
Oh, you had a look. I'm
yeah,
flattered that you even had a look. By the way, that's total chance. If you have a video file, Spotify automatically does it.
yeah, okay, nice. I didn't realize. Yeah,
It's not deliberate. I don't, admittedly, I know people, and I have done myself, watched podcasts on YouTube. I don't know many people that will intentionally go to Spotify to watch podcasts.
no, yeah, I agree.
But Dr. Rohin Francis, welcome. Thank you. I thought I wouldn't go in as the Archbishop of Banterbury and introduce you as one of my favourite Medfluencers because I've only been recently introduced to that, or just a YouTuber, because I think that would be slightly insulting. But you are a consultant cardiologist, amongst many other things. Where do you get the time with such an
Yeah,
incredibly important job, with the correct content you create, the effort, and I gather, without being presumptuous, the passion that you put into science communication? Where does it come from?
I think the key thing is that I enjoy doing it. So it's kind of like a hobby for me, and it's become sort of a hobby that takes up quite a lot of time. But I still get a lot of enjoyment from creating the videos and trying to get concept across to people. And if some people find it useful, that's fantastic. I hope they do. But I yeah, the job itself does take up a lot of time, and then obviously kids and everything. They'll always be the first priorities, but there's always a little bit of time now and again. My output is slow, and sometimes when I chat to other content creators, and I even the phrase kind of gets my hackles up a bit. It's slightly cringy phrase, but when I talk to other people who make videos or whatever it is, TikToks or YouTubes or anything, um, they sometimes say they feel pressure to, produce content, and maybe they have a weekly schedule or something like that, and it becomes a bit of a chore, and it becomes, like a job. Some of them, obviously, it is their job, but other people who are doing it on the side, like me, are creating a bit of self-imposed pressure. And I said from the beginning that I don't want to do that. So, I want to keep enjoying it, and just make time when I can. And if it means I go a few months without putting a video up, then, so be it. But yeah, right now I'm still having a great time.
Yeah, I definitely find that's the best way, well, personally, to go about things is when it's that self-imposed pressure of I have to do this something. I'm certain there's been studies into this as well. When people transfer something they see as a hobby into
Mm.
something that is monetized or something they feel they have to do, the happiness factor massively drops within that. Where did your interest in, I guess, science communication come from? Did that come from your initial involvement in medicine, and it kind of expanding that, because I know you do talks about space babies, why certain appendages aren't dicks can be dicks, and things like that,
Yeah.
and this involvement is that where did I guess the the want, the need, the desire to take your knowledge and share it with the masses, but in a really palatable and, I have to say, refreshing way, because I find with this almost informed way of thinking and social media content at the moment, like everything is reduced into sound bites and phrases or stoic quotes. And actually, I find what's really quite enjoyable about your content is that it is lengthy, it's nuanced, it's well thought out, it's obviously well planned, if you don't mind me saying. Much like I gather my first time of probably watching stand up, as I thought, oh, that just comes off their tongue like that. They're just thinking about that on stage in the moment. You obviously put a lot of thought into this, which means it has to be a huge passion of yours. Where did that initially come from?
I think I was always quite interested in writing. So I saw myself as a kind of journalist on as a side thing, from sort of uni days. I would edit the student paper and that kind of thing, and I kind of always had this journalistic interest. And then, for years when I was a junior doctor, it just kind of went sat on the back burner. I was busy with the job and everything. And then it was actually when I was doing a PhD and I had a bit more time on my hands, and one of my friends said, I've always given presentations kind of with a jokey, fun kind of, I've always tried to introduce a bit of humor into just professional things that I do. And he said, why don't you just, film yourself doing one of your presentations. And then that kind of became the YouTube channel. And I do wish I had started earlier. That's my one big regret. And if anyone listening is thinking about starting a podcast like this or a YouTube channel or whatever, is just go for it. You're never going to be perfect to begin with, and that doesn't matter. I do wish that I had started earlier. That's the one thing I'd change, because a lot of the big channels that I really enjoy, and I'm lucky to have got to know quite a few of them now. The key thing was they were early adopters, and obviously they are very good channels. They've stood the test of time, but they all got in early on, and I kind of wish I had. But so then I just started putting a few videos up and trying to combine comedy with medicine, and I didn't see many people kind of doing that, so thought I'd carve out a little niche, and it's kind of been going great.
Yeah. Was that something that came quite natural to you? Because I know like stand up is kind of aside what you do as well, but I think it's like wonderful how you've managed to combine them, because I think and I found this quite a lot because I deliver quite a lot of well-being talks for businesses and things. It's how you communicate things in person to how you are remotely is totally different. And I found there's obviously more of a visual aspect when you're delivering remotely, because people have got that Zoom fatigue. They've been sitting there with their mics off, they've been sitting there with their screens off. So you have to engage them another way. And the fact that you can combine these two, but also do that in person, I imagine that's quite challenging, but also the added humor and comedy elements add something to it there.
Yeah, I try and inject humor if I can, and I always hesitate to call myself a comedian. I think I'm a science communicator who does a bit of jokes. I wouldn't say I'm a comedian, and the stand-up stuff is great fun, but the stand-up events I've done have all been kind of a bit tame audiences with a little kind of geeky events and stuff. I haven't been to like a working men's club on a Saturday night and had like pint glasses thrown at me, but that would be very scary, that kind of environment. But it's it's a very different kind of thing doing a video and comedy. Although to be honest, I think this is where YouTubers and content creators have really led the way, because now you're seeing so many stand-up comedians trying to pivot, especially during the pandemic, to online, and some have done it really well, like Andrew Schultz.
That's who sprang to mind actually. His series that popped up.
So I thought that was really good in the pandemic. But now with sort of a lot of Netflix specials being generated from people's kind of YouTube presence, it's really changed the landscape. So I still prefer video if I had to choose to do one. I like that, because kind of for the reasons you said, I can kind of plan it out and make it exactly what I want. And the beauty of podcasts, the beauty of YouTube, is you can have that longer format, and people have the appetite for it, and I know they're pushing YouTube shorts and everything right now, obviously a sort of response to TikTok, but for me, I like that longer form. So I am more of a consumer of podcasts and longer videos, and I that's still the thing that kind of I feel is most creative. But the in-person stuff is fun too. It doesn't really pay anything, so that's kind of just doing it for the enjoyment. And you were saying about sort of Zoom presentations and stuff. I think that's one area I'm is a weak point. I struggle. I really need to have that kind of either completely one way like a video, or a bit of audience interaction. And when I'm giving presentations on Zoom or Teams, I really struggle. I just don't, because if you tell a joke, you have no idea how it's gone down.
Yeah.
So then I just try and probably just end up being really serious.
Yeah, not that it's exactly the same, but I'm a big fan of stand up, and that when I've heard of comics speak about bombing and just totally eating it on stage, and I just think, and exactly that, when you're delivering things online, especially like Zoom, and everyone's got their screens off, you've got no kind of visual feedback at all, because in a room you've got some sort of eye contact, or you've got a nodding head or a tilt of the head, you've got something to go off of, but you can't gauge the room at all, and it's essentially talking to yourself, isn't it?
No, it's painful. It's painful.
And then the Medluencers thing that you introduced me to recently, I can't believe I've never heard of that phrase. the rise of the Medluencers.
Yeah. I mean, this is sort of where I waste a lot of my time just following. I'm morbidly fascinated by these kind of the different Medfluencer arenas that there are. And there's some super cringy stuff, and then some stuff that I think is genuinely unprofessional, like really questionable. And of course there are lots of people who could be described as influencers who are doing great work and spreading great information. So it's all elements. But yes, I like to be, let's say, a little outspoken. I'm quite happy to call a spade, and there's a lot of terrible stuff out there.
Yeah, we've got a couple of mutual friends who I've had these conversations with, because I'm always conscious that, I'm a huge fan of medics. I'm a huge fan of the NHS and everything that everyone does, and especially those of you, as you said, that are putting out some really valuable and important content out there. Those that are, I guess, against the status quo, and they will actually speak their mind, obviously professionally. I think that's quite important, how we communicate that stuff, because no one really likes being held abuse, and I think that switches people off. But I guess the interesting part to me, which I'm always cautious about, especially, I guess, would it be fair to say, I don't want to make an assumption on your years of wisdom, but we're 30s?
Yeah, but end of my 30s. Yeah.
Okay, we're both there. That's fine to say. So probably our parents' generation is that doctors, especially medics, whatever their specialist field, is that it does carry some gravitas. It has this weight, this authority bias, that regardless of whether or not they're necessarily saying is informed, it's factually true, or it's been medically researched, that is gospel. So it does. I'm always curious about I guess, medics capitalizing on authority bias. And what's quite impressive, I guess, in a way, in a really crass way, is those that aren't even practicing are capitalizing on that. Because I know of quite a few, I guess it would be borderline. I can specifically refer to, I'm working in health and fitness, like doctors, non-practicing doctors, or haven't been practicing for years, that are putting Dr. So-and-so's supplements to questionable supplements, even from my limited nutritional and fitness kind of understanding, aren't based in any sort of fact. What's your kind of thoughts on that? And do you think there should be, without putting words in your mouth, something called, I don't know, like the vetting process, in which that if you aren't a practicing doctor, there should be a certain disregard to the doctor status? I don't know whether.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to say, isn't there? So for sure, I totally agree with the appeal to authority that doctors can use, sometimes quite cynically, and you've even got people who are medical students, you haven't even graduated, who are allowing people to think that they are doctors. They may not explicitly say it, but they'll have names like medic or something, and then you do a bit of digging, and they're not even graduated. That's not to say a medical student can't be giving great information. So I always try and judge, what people are saying on their merits. But for sure, people, are using that as a mark of authority. And from within medical circles, we will say, oh, so and so is fresh out of medical school, they've been working 2 months. Whereas someone like me, who's quite long in the tooth, I've been, practicing over 15 years. Obviously, that our experiences are going to be quite different. But I think to the general public, doctor is a doctor,
Sure.
and there's not always that appreciation that somebody might not have relevant expertise in the field. And I think a lot of the areas online which are particularly vulnerable to this are fitness kind of related stuff, nutrition, skincare. You've got a lot of people who claim to be experts who aren't necessarily genuinely credentialed in the field. And anybody can call themselves like some skin expert or a fitness expert. It doesn't mean anything. I mean, what is your actual qualification? So your quality control is difficult. And the question I'm asked most of the time by viewers or people on Twitter is how do I tell? How do I know? And it's a really difficult question. It's a really hard one to answer, because I think 99% of people can spot a complete quack. So if somebody's invoking some, spiritual thing or some sort of hocus pocus magic that they're essential oil will cure your cancer, I think most people would say, okay, that's BS. But if somebody has got a very sciencey sounding kind of, what they're saying, and they may come out with a lot of very in-depth mechanistic things. They might describe cellular pathways or talk about some sort of, physiology. Then I think to the layperson, oh, this person really knows what they're talking about. But then their view might be completely outside the consensus, completely outside what is deemed normal or evidence-based. And that's kind of a separate topic in itself, which I'm sure we can come on to, about, people going against the grain. Like, I'm the doctor who's got the secrets, and I've got this information that others won't tell you. But ignoring that for 1 second, there is a general consensus on, say, for example, non-health related climate change. There are some people online who will say that climate change isn't real, but 99.5% of scientists all believe the same thing. So either this tiny little fringe group are smarter than everybody else, or this is just people just trying to generate sort of a following online. And the same thing happens in health. And we've seen this with, dietary recommendations. People will gain a lot of traction by deliberately contradicting medical guidelines. And the problem is that there are occasions through history where medical guidelines have been overturned, where knowledge has changed. And we've kind of seen the whole thing happen in fast forward with COVID. There have been the same kinds of binary divisions of this works, this doesn't work. And the reality of most of these things, and most things in science, is it's always kind of a bit more nuanced than that. There's always a bit of, a gray area. And I think social media just really guides people to these fringes, and it's really polarized and caused a lot of extremism. So that was kind of a rambling answer to your question, but there's a lot to say about it for sure.
Yeah, I think it's largely because a lot of them have such a huge platform as well. It's kind of difficult, almost impossible to totally ignore. And I guess, what would your advice be for people maintaining a healthy level of skepticism? Because I think, like, when we talk about evidence-based, people get quite upset and think, people should be more critical thinkers, etc. But that's quite an abstract thing for people, unless you're
I agree,
well versed in what critical thinking actually is. But I guess something a lot of people could get their head around is, like, how do I maintain a healthy level of skepticism? Like, are they talking in absolutes? What sort of things should I be looking out for? Because sometimes the hardest thing to dispel, I know you referenced it on your Twitter recently. I'd only seen it through your Twitter, but Huberman talking about breathing, teaching people how to breathe. And because of these complex mechanisms they talk, and I haven't listened to that episode, admittedly, behind that is people just nod their head in agreement because they don't really know how to challenge that. They don't know what to be looking for outside of what that person has said, because they are a doctor, they're well versed, they've got a huge platform, lots of people listen to them. Where do they start?
Yeah, it's super tough, and someone like Andrew Huberman, who first thing I'd say is, I'm not at all suggesting that even the majority of what he says is questionable or anything like that. But he does have a tendency to say things that are not evidence-based, and will really veer off into some sort of strange territory sometimes. And that, I think, is a really challenging one for people to spot, because even scientists will sometimes come to me and say, what did you think of, so and so? And I kind of feel like, you're trained in science. You understand that his expertise, he's a basic science retinal biologist, essentially, the eye. And so do you think that he can have expertise in all of these fields? This is not at all to attack him. Nobody can. I try not to speak outside of my area of expertise. And if I do, I make it clear that I'm not an expert, but I'm trying to figure out the answer myself, and I can use skills about sort of doing medical research or something to try and find an answer, but I'm absolutely not an expert in everything. So I think maybe the one easy tip with that is, don't, some of the people, and in that Twitter thread, I was sort of highlighting some of the comments beneath his video, is almost sort of elevating an individual to a cult-like status. Don't get all of your information from a single source. So that's an easy one. If you find some sort of podcaster or YouTube channel who you just really click with and think that everything they say is gospel, then you should challenge that. You should look for other sources of information. Are they saying things that other scientists agree with? Are they saying something completely different? Is it likely they will have some special secret information that nobody else is party to? Or, are they actually just a sort of fringe character? And so I think that's a actionable tip. The second would be, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. I think that's the other thing is when people say, oh, beetroot juice is going to improve your running time, then that's harmless. Beetroot. I'm not going to care if people go out and start drinking beetroot juice. It's based on a little kernel of truth. There was some studies that suggested beetroot juice as a donor of nitric oxide can improve blood circulation, but it has no meaningful clinical benefit. Or every Olympic athlete would be like mainlining beetroot juice before they go and run. And so we know that if something just sounds kind of like, oh, surely I would have heard of that before. If it sounds a bit too good to be true, then it probably is. Now, beetroot juice is harmless, but a lot of the time it's not. A lot of the time they're selling something. They're selling some supplement. They're selling some workout, pre-workout or some sort of, fitness-related supplement. And a lot of the things that go into these are unregulated. A lot of the time that they haven't gone through the usual safety mechanisms that drugs would go through, and they cost money. Even if they're totally safe, I don't want people spending their money on things that aren't going to help. And again, I think there's nuance to that. I don't want to be I'm not one of those doctors that is very anti anything outside the medical kind of world. I think the medical world does what it does really well, but I think it does a lot of things really badly, and I think there is that market for people who are interested in alternative medicine and things outside of conventional medicine, which conventional medicine does poorly, so I'm not at all suggesting that you can't look for other things to optimize your performance or to improve your health, but I just don't want people being conned. I don't want people being misled that a certain thing is going to do something it won't, because not only will they lose money, but it can lead to people not doing proven things because they think there's something else is going to do the job. And, the worst case scenario is people not taking evidence-based medicine in favor of something else for something really serious, like cancer or something. So, that's kind of my main objection. But yeah, I think those are the two things that you can easily do, is try and seek more than one source, try and challenge your assumptions, try and look for people who say different things, and try not to get fooled by promises that seem a bit too good.
Yeah, I caught a documentary actually on BBC Three. I'm sure it still is on BBC Three online, the iPlayer, a little while ago, and it was about a gent that he had been diagnosed with cancer, unfortunately, got caught up in all this almost a well-being cult, and this some of the information amongst many of the other things they was like exchange your CBD for your chemo, basically. I gather from a place of desperation, people are willing to try anything, but I think it's the danger is when you by the way, this is anyone listening, I'm not making medical suggestions here, but perhaps the information would be do your chemo, but if you want to try the CBD stuff as well, do that. But the real dangerous part is, as you said, step away from the conventional, proven, scientific, evidence-based medical intervention and try this totally abstract, strange thing. And that's quite, again, two other challenges I was thinking about when you were talking about that is firstly, actively looking outside your echo chamber. Because we all have this habit of cultivating this little echo chamber where everyone's patting each other on the back, because no one really likes to be challenged online, because we know social media is actually a terrible place to debate anything anyway, because no one, well, I haven't seen anyone hold their hands up and go, do you know what? you're right, I'm wrong on anything
Well, I
ever.
think if they do, which is a perfectly good thing to do, that
Yeah, I would
shows
like
that
to see
you're,
more. Yeah,
changing your mind, then they're just castrated. Sorry, they are crucified by by often their followers.
yeah.
It's tough to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Then there's the performative element of that. Once you've grown a certain following that are dependent on a certain polarized view of things, you have to
Mm,
play up to that to appease
totally.
the
Yeah.
audience. And then it's distinguishing between misinformation, which I guess I can certainly reflect on the last 10, 15 years, is we've all kind of been guilty of sharing the odd thing and not fact checking it. And then the deliberate disinformation, which is the consciously aware snake
Mm.
oil salesmen, if you like. They are deliberately out there exploiting people and trying to manipulate them. So there are so many factors to think about, which is I try to take a compassionate view of these things and understand why people get caught up in it.
Oh yeah, I'd
But at the
never
same
criticize
time, I get
people.
cross with myself and I get cross with my peers, and I think, are we just all enablers? Are we just, part of the problem here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a valid question, and I do see it different in different across different sort of social media platforms, and I do think Instagram is particularly bad because I see a lot of sort of patting each other on the back and a lot of people platforming each other um, when they know that like there's a very big medical podcast. It's run by a doctor in the UK, and well, I don't mind saying it. It's Rangan Chatterjee's podcast. Live well, feel better. I think that's what it's called. And again, plenty of great advice and just general stuff. But multiple guests on that show have been complete quacks, and
Mm.
then the host had said a little while ago on Twitter saying, "Oh, people are attacking me for who I invite. I believe that we should have varied conversations, and we should listen to different viewpoints." That it's a great soundbite,
Yeah.
but you're a medically trained doctor. You should be able to push back on people, or you shouldn't invite somebody who has got incorrect medical views. And I find that this is this kind of this mutually congratulatory thing. And somebody will put some post up, which is just gibberish, and everyone will just kind of clap and do some emojis underneath because they want to chase the clout. If somebody's got 500,000 followers, they want a bit of the action. They want to be their friend. And maybe it's because I'm quite antisocial and don't really care too much about making friends, but that's why I'm sort of happy to call it out. But as a result, my following is minute compared to all of this, and I think if you are that kind of middle of the road, sensible, slightly cynical person, and I'd put you in that category as well. I think that the stuff you say is all sensible, but then you're not. None of us are seeing the
Not
wild
sexy.
growth in our following as
Grey
somebody who,
area.
yeah. So it's frustrating. It's frustrating, and
Mm.
sometimes people will, they'll privately tell me, "Oh, did you see that post from? Oh God, how could she say that? How could he say that?" And I'm like, "Why are you liking the post then? I mean, what are you doing?"
Yeah, that's the other thing, isn't it? The politics of it, the performative element is you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. And
Yeah, totally.
the most, I guess, compelling thing I've kind of thought around it is this sense of, and by the way, to your point, is I consider that a real ethical responsibility, that if you do consider yourself a credible, evidence-based professional, is that it is kind of your job to disseminate the information, but give possibly both sides of it. And I see, especially on my side with fitness and nutrition, and people call themselves mental health coaches, that you're only getting one aspect of it, and it's the aspect that that audience likes to hear about. But I've heard David Grimes speak about false balance, and
Mm.
as a personal responsibility thing, is some things just aren't even worth platforming and discussing because of that, and it almost elevates it to this point where people consider these things in equal measure when actually
Yeah, I
one
think
side of
that's
that
a very good
argument
point.
is
Yeah.
totally irrelevant, and perhaps we shouldn't be giving those people platforms at all. But that's easier said than done, especially when it's my industry. There is no authority, no regulatory body, and who would you give that responsibility to? Where I gather medics, it is slightly different. There are consequences
I mean, you say
Well,
that, but we've had some people really go off the rails recently, and
oh, I don't know whether you want me to mention it. Oh, mate, you're welcome to. It's only my mum and one other listens to this. That's why I'm so grateful that you've given up your time. So if you want to mention names, but yeah, specifically one.
yeah, I mean, so a fellow
Halmotra.
cardiologist called Malhotra, who for many years was a kind of a bit of a left field voice when it came to fat in the diet and statins and things like that. And I didn't mind that. I had time for that. It's good to have different viewpoints on things, and I didn't have a problem. And we still follow each other, and we've talked several times, but more recently has really kind of gone off the deep end when it comes to vaccines. And I consider myself quite a vaccine centrist. I'm not. I've always from the beginning been against mandating vaccines. I'm pleased actually that the UK didn't follow the American kind of model at all. I've made videos about the kind of poor evidence for young people, particularly children, and so I'm not someone who's very zealous either way, but some of the stuff he said is just completely unfounded, and it's really been just quite alarming how much he's changed. And of course, he's seen a huge boost in his followers as well. And several people reported him to the General Medical Council, which is our regulatory body, which provides our licenses. And they have updated their social media policy in recent years, so it is more up to date. I mean, a few years ago, it was absolutely hopeless. Like it sort of predated social media. It just sounded completely archaic, and it's a bit more up to date now. Still got some odd things, but basically they came back and said, we're not going to do anything. It's kind of not within our remit, and there is a clause of bringing the profession into disrepute is a thing that they can reprimand you for, but they said nothing. And I think a lot of people got a kind of boilerplate response, which was shared online, and it just kind of said, and I thought that was probably one of the most heinous examples of a medic saying incorrect stuff. So if they're not going to go after that, it does kind of feel like actually you can say whatever you want. I really don't think that there's much regulation, and there's even less in other countries. Australia, interestingly, has much stricter regulation, really much stricter for medics there. So swings and roundabouts. But when it comes to what I can't remember what you were saying beforehand now. Sort of fitness and sort of regulation and stuff. Yeah, you were talking about
who would be
platforming.
the regulatory body for fitness? I don't think there's anyone I can think of that's responsible enough.
No, and it is tough. Like, where do you draw the line? You were saying sort of should you platform somebody with sort of wild ideas? And sometimes I see big debunking accounts with hundreds of thousands of followers pulling some random Twitter account with 6 followers and saying, "Oh, look at that," and like nobody would have seen that unless you brought it up. So I feel like that's kind of not achieving it. You're just preaching to the choir. Your audience already knows it's not true. But then if somebody comes out with some kind of cockeyed theory about COVID in the middle of the sort of peak pandemic, and they start telling people to inhale bleach or something, then when do you come out and oppose that? When it's got 100 people retweeting it, when it's got 1,000 people? So there is no line. So I wouldn't know where to say you need to tackle something or not. Like what point does it need to get to for it to be discussed? Because there's all this talk of shining the light of, I don't know, I forget the expression now, but sort of the light of, bring something to light, and you will blow away dispel the rumors if you tackle things head on. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true, because there's all kinds of things about flat earth or something, but you still have people believing it. So I don't know if bringing something into the open always helps. And then there's the opposing kind of thing of giving them the oxygen of publicity. So should we just allow them? But then in the age of social media, people have their echo chambers, and you'll have these people believing these things, going unquestioned. So I don't know who would determine what things we need to cover. And as you said, I don't know who would be the regulatory body in something like fitness.
And then there's a conversation about free speech as well, as people should have a right to express their views, but
Yeah.
are they arguably dangerous or not? I don't know. If it's purely speculative, I know you wouldn't know for sure, but I gather that might have received a few complaints. The information around the COVID and being particularly anti-vaccine. What would you, I guess, if you can, speculate as to the reason why they didn't pursue that, or they didn't take any further measures? Or
I don't know, actually. It's an interesting question. I think I mean, this is pure speculation. I don't know. I wonder if they are actually a little bit apprehensive about the backlash that would happen, because he might use it as a kind of, I've been silenced.
right,
He's not
sure.
really practicing anymore. So it's not really going to negatively affect him in a big way if he loses medical license. He might use it as a badge of honor. He might, use it that, haha, the authorities are onto me kind of thing. But it's also, if sometimes when I have, tweeted things to him, and like I say, we have a civil relationship, and we both lost our mums around the same time, and we talked about that. And then more recently, his dad passed away, and he's really been going through a rough time, and I think that's all part of it. So I've always tried to be civil and engage with him. But when I have said anything, sort of saying, why are you saying that, I get jumped on by the kind of his fans who are not as polite as him, and it can be quite stressful. It can really tax you mentally, and they say some horrendous things, and they accuse you of all kinds of things. So I wonder if there's also an element that the GMC just kind of don't want that heat. But I don't know. I mean, that's complete speculation. It may well be that they just determine that social media is kind of, he's allowed to say what he wants. So I don't know. I don't know if this. I'm not even saying it's the wrong decision. I don't know if it's the right or the wrong decision. I don't envy them. So I'm not criticizing them, but it was just interesting that was a case study, because there are people doing very different kinds of things online. For example, selling unlicensed treatments or offering treatments on social media. You're not supposed to solicit, medical custom like that online. You shouldn't be giving medical advice online, and people are doing that left, right, and center. So it kind of feels like the GMC are probably a little bit toothless when it comes to online stuff.
Yeah. There's so much of it, I guess, to tackle as well. And that's actually a really important point of consideration you mentioned there, is even if you do feel like it's your responsibility to a certain degree professionally, because I know I've certainly commented on people with much larger platforms, posts before, either to be totally ignored or to be jumped on by their followers.
Yeah,
and it's not nice. I do think you have to be fairly thick-skinned, and social media has this capacity to dehumanize people. So, the way people speak to each other, sometimes I can honestly say I've never called someone names in the comments before, but you see of some of the things that people write, and it's pretty disgusting at times.
Yeah, it's awful. And so I would never criticize someone for just keeping their nose out. I mean, just staying out of it.
Yeah.
Like I think I do that more and more these days, because it's just more mentally calm to have a quiet life, and the people who really get a thrill out of it, I think that's maybe they've got a screw loose as well. But so I'm not at all suggesting that people have to call stuff out. I just think you also don't need to praise stuff as well. You can just be neutral.
Yeah, that is a really hard one. I must ask you, why the specialism in cardiology?
I just always thought the heart was cool, to be honest. I just
Is it quite insulting when you see on Valentine's Day and stuff it reduced to this little
no, that's our day. That's like that's our Christmas. That's the day, and I tell all the other specialties. I said, "Where's your day?" There's no liver day, there's no stomach day. But yeah, no. I mean, we play along with all the gags and everything. I think part of it is it's clean. I have a very low tolerance for stinking bodily fluids and
Yeah.
mucus and others. So it's quite, blood is fine. I can deal with blood, and it's
Was it was
cool.
it was that something that came out of your training, that you shadowed some work, or you began some work there and you thought, I just
Yeah,
want
I think when I was kind of towards the end of medical school, I did a cardiology job, and I just found it fascinating. The physiology side of it um, is I'm really interested in, and that's sort of led into my interest in kind of sports side of things as well. So sports physiology obviously is a big area, but the kind of cardiovascular side I'm quite interested in, and that's kind of I'm very much not in the fitness space in as an influencer or anything, but my interest is in that kind of cardiovascular aspect to it, and that's a big part of sport as well, and of medicine as well, is people interested in kind of training and stuff. So yeah, no, it's really cool, and I like that exercise is a major part of what I talk about with patients, and I try and practice what I preach as much as I can.
what would you enjoy doing in terms of
I mean,
looking after
nowadays,
everyone?
I've just built a gym in my garage, so just trying to get back into. I basically hadn't done much for a while, except running and stuff, while I moved house and everything. But tennis and cricket are my kind of two main sports. But try anything when you've as you know as well, when you've got young kids, it's just anything you can do is a bonus. Like, so
Yeah.
I will go weeks barely doing any dedicated exercise sometimes, and I'm trying to make it more of a regular habit now.
But running around after them keeps you on your toes anyway. I find you need a certain level of fitness to chase after them.
Oh yeah, and they're always demanding to be carried and chucked in the air, and
Yeah.
but the one thing now is I've just turned 40. Uh, the injuries are really getting much worse now. Like
Poor
they're not
hamstring just from turning in the wrong direction too far.
just yawning or something. But the thing, they just they don't fully heal now. Like I
Mm.
had a shoulder thing for like 6 months, and it's just you really feel your body start to fall to pieces.
Yeah. Uh, a fairly serious question, I guess. Apart from all-round mortality, how important is physical activity for the heart?
Oh, I mean, not just the heart, but for everything. Exercise is the best. So I've got a kind of gag that well, it's not a gag, but it's kind of a bit cringy, cliched line. But if you described exercise like a drug, if you recorded its side effect profile and its potential benefits, like it would knock every medication out of the water by a mile, because it's got impact on literally every aspect of the body, your bone health, your diabetes, weight, your life expectancy, breathing, everything is affected by exercise. And it's also extremely safe and free, so it just, if we could bottle it as a pill, you'd be a multi-billionaire. So absolutely, it's the number one thing I recommend, and um, anyone can benefit, no matter what level you are starting at. Any exercise is better than nothing, and more exercise is generally better. Now, I make a slight caveat, because some people at the extreme end of doing loads of exercise, then we actually see the benefits sort of plateau. And there's even a small signal that there might be some increased risk of certain things if you do excessive exercise, which we can chat about if you like. But yeah, I mean, I try and encourage everyone to do a bit of exercise. But for my patients, that's not the kind of stuff that you do. It's much more just walking to the shops, and a lot of their goals are very, very different, and they will have very different starting point. So this is something I'm still, really learning, and continue to learn. And some of my colleagues who are the kind of nurse specialists who look at the cardiac rehab stuff after people have had a heart attack, they're the real experts. And if you look at all the stuff I do with a patient, if I put a stent in or do certain procedure on their heart, the biggest impact comes from that exercise program,
Mm.
still, so after a heart attack. So It's a real unsung hero.
Yeah, I always find that it's so sad. And I find, especially with what I do and what I hopefully try to promote, is that the only reasons so many people engage in physical activity is just to change the shape of their bodies or to change their body weight.
Yeah, yeah. I
As you say,
mean, for
there's
sure.
this whole host of other health benefits and reasons to engage it, which extend just beyond health benefits, but mental health benefits as
Yeah,
well,
mood,
mood,
absolutely, absolutely.
well-being,
Yeah, yeah.
and everything else. It's such a sad thing. Off on a slight tangent, because I have to ask you, space. Where does
Yeah,
the fascination with space come from as well, and how was it experiencing zero gravity?
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Because that was I only discovered that, I think, from you quite recently. Did you do that over the last year or so?
I did that just over a year ago, but then I went back to the European Space Agency a few weeks ago to do an event about the mission to the
I've
moon.
seen a video of you spinning and getting quite
Yeah,
giddy.
yeah. Oh, that was a real once in a lifetime experience, and that's purely because of YouTube. So they just invited me along. They watched the YouTube channel,
Incredible.
so that alone has justified making the channel, because that was something I've always wanted to do. The interest comes. I always wanted to be an astronaut. Actually, that was my dream, and I did a degree in space medicine, and I thought I was going to be the doctor, like applying to become an astronaut and go on a mission. And I did a sort of placement with NASA, and their time frame when I was back at uni in the early noughties was 2015 or 2018. They were telling me that they were going to be going to Mars or something. So that's what I thought I would aim for. And then obviously, none of that time frame has ever happened. And the thing is, when you come from the UK, there are very few opportunities to apply to astronaut training. In America, NASA, they take every 2 years, whereas Tim Peake, you might remember, the British astronaut who was in the International Space Station a few years ago. So he applied in 2008. So I was too young then. And then the next round was only last year.
Oh wow.
So,
Yeah.
that was a huge gap. And in that period, I just kind of decided that it's not going to happen and just went down a conventional route. But it meant that by the time that the applications did open, I kind of, my career was heading in the wrong way, and I didn't have the relevant expertise and stuff. And on this recent trip, I actually met one of the guys who was successful, who applied through that application process, and very nice guy. Oh, sorry, just one sec, Dan. I'm just something. I'll come out later. I'll come out later. Sorry, I forgot to lock the door.
That's all right. What a small creature crept in.
Small creature kept in, yeah. The older one.
My office is at the end of the garden, so I've said my goodnights.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. Yeah. But yeah, so I kind of accepted that my career is not going to go down the space route, but I've maintained an interest, and now it's quite nice that I can just be involved without actually
Yeah.
doing any of the work.
Well, as you said, that once in a lifetime experience going up there, and I gather one of the biggest things that people associate with space is zero gravity. So having experienced
Yeah.
a part of it is, yeah, absolutely huge. Oh, amazing. If anyone wanted, I'm very conscious of your time, your precious, valuable time, especially if you've got to say goodnight. If anyone wanted to find out a little bit more about you, we've mentioned YouTube. Also, Nebula. I just want to quickly ask you about Nebula. You're streaming, or
Mm.
you and a bunch of other creators in this. I haven't actually had an opportunity to have a look at it yet, but if you could direct people there, or maybe talk about that, your podcast as well. That's
Well,
fairly.
podcast isn't really a podcast. I've just decided to put the audio of some of my videos in a podcast form for people who want to listen, because some of my videos is just basically me talking. So you're not losing anything by not looking at my face. In fact, you could argue that it's an improvement.
There's an epic moustache you can grow. I envy that
Oh
moustache.
yeah, the facial hair has become a kind of character in itself. But yeah, I'm in YouTube and Twitter and Instagram and all the usual places as Medlife Crisis. And Nebula is a streaming service that we started up, which is a subscription thing, but it's really not very expensive. And there's, I think, maybe almost 200 creators on there making content. Some of their content is on YouTube, but there's also exclusive stuff there as well. And it's been a really interesting process. I mean, I'm not really involved in the business side, except, you know, like discussion, sort of high level discussions and stuff. But it's just been fantastic to be involved in the team, building something new, startup, and very exciting. And it seems to be going really well. So, you know, with social media landscape changing, you know, now with, it looks like we may be coming out of the era where a lot of social media was free, because, you know, Twitter, now Facebook, all offering paid tiers and everything.
I think Instagram are introducing like a
Yeah,
pay for your blue.
verification and stuff. Yeah, yeah. This is the thing with these tech billionaires. They're all such individuals. They have this all have different ideas, don't they? But so it's nice to have this kind of side thing, and it's been a nice passion project. You know, if people want to take a look, nebula.tv, and then you can sign up if you like, and get access to that stuff. But yeah, no, it's just a fun thing we've been doing.
Yeah, I really respect that, actually, that it's not even the intention to have it as like a side project, if you like. The fact that you've just got another creative outlet that you can passionately direct things. Kind of why I want to do this podcast as well, is just another, I like longer form conversation. I
Totally, yeah.
ideas, and just another creative outlet without any real agenda or aim or focus. As I said, I've probably got 2 listeners. So yeah, thank you so much from me. Thank you for all the information you put out. Thank you for your time, because I know that's
Oh
precious
no,
and valuable. I
not at
really
all.
appreciate you. And yeah, I hope that people get lots from this.
Hope so too. Yeah, thanks so much for the invite. It's
No, I
lovely
really
to chat
appreciate it.
properly after talking lots online for
Yeah,
a few
it
years.
have to be in real life at some point.
Yeah. That been we've got a mutual friend in Mike, who I also haven't met in person, but I've
Oh,
actually
really?
met his family, uh,
Oh, you
randomly.
did tell me, actually, because you visited his mum. Because you're,
Yeah. So
I'm
so
gonna
yeah,
I'm gonna give out your
we've got to
postcode
try
on.
and get together sometime. Although, you know, I'd feel very out of place at one of those fitness events. I'll have to take some of the unlicensed supplements in advance.
But you are. I'm not gonna. I haven't been peering through your window admiring your pincushions or anything like that. But you are a fellow Essexshire person as well, aren't you?
Yeah. It's just as of 1 year or so now,
Yeah.
moved out of London to Colchester.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Not too far from me. I'm Shoeburyness.
Okay, yeah.
Nice.
I'm
Near
still
South
learning the
End.
geography.
Near South End.
Yeah. Not far at all.
Thanks again. I'm going to stop recording there. But if you do like this, rate this, share it with friends, and all that kind of stuff. Leave a nice review if you like it as well. Thanks.